Yeah, it's been a real adventure bringing this all together. Very revealing experience for me, and perhaps for you. I'll keep any personal feelings I have in regards to some of the obstacles we ran into to myself right now, because you didn't come here to hear me rant. You came here to hear from our guests. And let me just very quickly, we can just go across very quickly so we know who you're talking to. You guys want to just very quickly introduce yourselves?
Julia.
I'm Rebecca Phelps Davis.
Shirley Phelps Roper.
Rebecca Phelps Roper. Rebecca Jakes. And Jax Blackmore.
And Jex is also here with the other folks.
Yep, that's Leah and Sam.
Leah and
With
Sam.
me.
Okay. Some of you might vaguely remember the actual malice rule, the Times versus Sullivan ruling that led to the actual malice rule. Remember one of the reasons for providing that additional protection to the press when they're writing about controversial issues? If you remember, that was an essay question. You don't remember it? Oh, well, it said, one reason we provide extra protection to the press is because we want to encourage free speech. As the Supreme Court said, we want to safeguard what they called uninhibited, robust, and wide-open debate on matters of public interest. And I think that's what you're going to see here today. Uninhibited, freewheeling debate, discussion on matters that I think are of interest to many of you: gay rights, gay marriage, abortion, church and state, separation of church and state, as well as hate speech, symbolic speech, maybe time, place, and manner restrictions will come up. They're often applied to you folks. And lots of things, a lot of terms might come up that I hope you recall from earlier in the semester. So I hope today's discussion will help you to think carefully and critically about the First Amendment, how far it goes, how far you think it should go, how much speech does it protect, what's its purpose in society, what are some of the conflicts and issues that arise with the exercise of free expression. And those will be on display today, I do believe. So I hope you'll be thinking about that. Unfortunately, we have to clear out of here like right at about 3:15. Another class is coming in. If you're interested in, maybe you're shy about speaking up in class, but you do want to interact with any of our guests here a bit more, we'll be down in Moore 118 right after class for maybe half hour, 40 minutes. So feel free to join us down there in Moore 118 after class, and you can chat. Also, if you're joining, several of you indicated you wanted to join us for dinner. If you could just talk to me quickly at the end of class, we can give you the details on that. Yes, how does irons agree?
Yeah.
Okay, it's about to get hot. So, here are the ground rules, okay? Here are the ground rules. I'm going to open with just my own question for both of our guests. They'll answer individually, and I've sort of told them what that question would be. I'm then going to turn over the floor to both. I'm guessing we'll hear primarily from Shirley and Jex, but not necessarily. But I'll turn the floor over to these folks one at a time, and then give them free rein to say whatever they wish for like 3 to 5 minutes. Okay? So whatever you all want to say at that point. After that, we're going to open up the Q&A, and that's you guys hear from me all semester. I'd much rather hear from you. I'm going to do all I can to defer to students, so I'd rather hear from you, and that's where I kind of want you to drive the ship at that point, okay? A couple things, you want to applaud, that's okay, groan, laugh, even a polite boo is okay. Just don't be so noisy that you're disrupting classes next door, okay? And don't interfere with our guests' First Amendment rights by shouting them down or making it impossible for them to be heard. In other words, don't exercise a heckler's veto, okay? Don't exercise a heckler's veto. Right?
Interesting.
Okay. That's about it. And do feel, free to disagree or agree. Passionately, vehemently, that's fine. Just do it respectfully and peacefully, of course. And by all means, exercise your own rights to free expression. Okay? That's it. I've gone over the other rules several times, so I won't go over them again. We've already talked about them. That's it. So can I start out with a question for you all? Okay. Whoever wishes to go first. And I think I sent this to you. Let's sort of paraphrase it here, but free speech, free expression comes at a cost, and while you come at it from very different perspectives, you both hold beliefs that are inflammatory, unpopular, profoundly offensive to folks, and sometimes your words and your actions outrage people. So with that in mind, I guess what price do you pay for free expression, for free speech? So, how often are you ostracized? Do you feel ostracized, isolated, publicly reviled? How often are you dragged into the courtroom? Do you encounter threats of any type, especially on a regular basis? So again, what is the cost for you personally of exercising your free speech rights? Anybody? Let's see.
You want to go
J
first?
comes before S, so do you want to try it?
Absolutely. Well, I'm very happy to be here, and I'm very grateful that you all are here to listen to this spirited discussion, as I'm sure it will be. So yes, I am a big, I'm a big fan of seeing where the limitations of free speech exist, and I think that's very important because the ability for us to express our ideas and opinions, whether or not those are popular opinions, is critical to preserving our own independence, being able to advocate for ourselves, and challenging established systems of power that often attempt to silence us or to ask us to kind of toe the line in reaffirming norms that may or may not be oppressive or harmful to us as individuals or as groups of people. I work very much to neutralize situations where theocratic mandates attempt to control and dictate the rights of individuals. So, mandates that say biblical law should be enforced in a way that the court system backs it up, or people who represent us in our government support, and in that way, are oppressive to people who don't necessarily believe in those that same position. And challenging the church is probably one of the most dangerous things that you can do in society throughout history. The church is an incredibly powerful source, and it continues to be today. So of course, when I speak out against some of the church's moral teachings or advocate for there to be a neutral platform, it angers a lot of people, and that has resulted in death threats being sent my way, and certainly some apprehension when it comes to working with me on projects or conversations or whatever public experience that I might be curating. But that being said, I also have experienced a great deal of support and had built an incredibly robust community that now exists with thousands of people who are empowered by our approach to challenging restrictions of free speech. And as a result, I think that there's the sacrifice and the fear that kind of come with stepping out of your comfort zone and challenging kind of corrupt systems of power is worth it, and is worth the sacrifice. And I think that's incredibly important today, because we see vast inequality in our society, and we see people that are maintaining privileged positions of power who are often granted the right to speak. Their opinions are elevated, and many of us aren't granted the same kinds of privileges and rights. So especially at this time, I think it is critical that we continue to kind of challenge those things by exercising our free speech and free expression. And college campuses are one of the most important places that we can do that, I think. Students have always been, an incredibly vital role to new social movements and fighting for injustices. And I think what's interesting about the administration here, who is very critical and concerned about the kind of conversation that we're having, is that I don't believe are concerned about us. I think that they're concerned about you. They're concerned about the way that you would react to speech that you don't necessarily agree with. And it's a good thing to make people who are in those powerful positions to fear you in some ways, because it maintains a power balance that benefits everybody. And I know that we are business of being respectful here, but I think that it's well within your right to express your frustration and discontent or approval by any vocal means, especially because the people that you pay to provide you with an education is attempting to kind of curtail that and prevent you from that form of expression, and also from participating in a conversation from two divergent points of view. So there's a great deal of there's a great importance in being able to freely express yourself. It's very difficult to do because of these established power structures. It's much easier if you already enjoy a form of privilege, if you're a white person, if you're a straight white person. It's much easier to challenge oppressive systems through your speech than it is if you're not. The Black Panther Party, there's still over a dozen of them in prison today for kind of similar forms of speech, and that continues to be an issue for people in Black Lives Matter movement and others who attempt to advocate for themselves but are advocating from a position of an oppressed group. So I think that's really important to keep in mind, that free speech comes at a risk and a great cost, but it is critical to maintaining our own independence, freedom, and power. And I think that's right.
Sure, anybody?
Yeah, I think your question was, what is the cost of free speech? So to set the tone, the proper tone for this discussion, start with this. Flesh is grass. All flesh is grass. This teeny little bit of time you're spending in this earth is like the flower of the field. It's going to be gone so fast that then you'll be starting your real time. And what you do in this life instructs eternity. So look at the First Amendment and see the hand of God in everything. Every single thought, deed, thing that you see across the landscape, everything in the realm of your life. And say this: the Lord God put that First Amendment in place in this country. By the time we get here, it's been honed and refined, so that by the time we stood in the Supreme Court and looked those judges in the eye, it was a done deal. It wasn't even a close question. Of course, we can stand on the street with some signs that warn our neighbor that the day is coming when you will wish that you had listened, that you didn't go the way of all flesh. You see, I love this right here. She calls herself the Satanic Temple, but she is you. Most of you agree with her about fornication, adultery, sodomy, transgenderism, and all the rest of the proud sins of this nation. So it's supremely boring, one. And two, it doesn't add anything. There's no conflict. The quarrel of the covenant is with God. That's where the conflict is. The speech that's popular doesn't really necessarily need protecting. It's the speech that's unpopular. And again, that First Amendment was put in place by the Lord our God. It is going to make sure that we stand on these streets and put these words in front of this nation and the whole world. From this land, we preach to the whole world.
And some of the prices that come for doing that are violently trying to shut us down. I mean, it's usually with your body, with other people's, with counter-protesters.
Well, we've been bombed. We've been shot at. We've had our houses shot up. We've been sued. We've been prosecuted. The woman that took office when we first started picketing had filed over 500 charges against us before she left office 8 years later. The cost is worth it all. There's no cost. It's nothing, because the Lord our God has delivered us from every evil work. When the jury in Maryland gave Albert Snyder $10.9 million for a verdict. It caused this gospel to go global. And so we say yay, and thank God. It turned to us for testimony. And that's what we're about.
We have a duty to take joyfully the spoiling of our goods. That means that we have a duty to not be worried about if we're going to tell you what the truth of God is and you want to take everything that we have because we tell you that. We are not supposed to worry about that and rather take joyfully the spoiling of our goods. So we know it's going to happen, it has happened, but through it all, none of it has been successful, and through it all, the word of God has gone forth unto the whole world. Those 500 charges, none of them successful. She totally destroyed. That prosecutor was totally destroyed.
And it was a
by her own
terribly,
hand.
and it was a terribly sad story, but that's getting too far afield. Anyway,
Now remember Phelps v. Snyder? Page 173. I think. Okay. Real quick, just a quick follow-up to that, Jack, is it fair to say that your speech is popular speech? Is that a fair summation of
yes.
what you're putting out there? My guess is it's not necessarily that popular. There's a lot of opposition to any anti-religious or anti-Christian expression in the U.S.
Oh, I'm sorry, I meant to
Yeah,
cover
yeah.
that. I'm so sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, that was
Those
the-
churches, she talked about the churches. The churches, we are outside these churches every week. Every time Sunday hits, we're somewhere in this country. We've had 27 years of every day being on these streets, more than 65,000. The bulk of those 65,000 plus pickets were at churches, because all of these churches strip away their names. Catholic, Episcopal, Baptist, take them all away, and you just look at that, what their doctrine is. They all agree with you. And I love that because she put the proper moniker on her religion, Satan. They serve Satan. Those are Satan's doctrines, Satan's gospel. And the Lord Jesus Christ sent Paul to say, if you bring any other gospel than this that you find written in these words, let them be accursed. So sorry, I forgot that.
Well, that's something that we agree on. I agree with you that the Bible would, a biblical text would define me as satanic or under Satan's influence. And I think that people for thousands of years have suffered under the yoke of that terminology if you practice any alternative sexuality or are an outspoken independent female, a scientist who celebrates medicine and the scientific method have been deemed satanic by the church for a very long time. So yes, what I've done and what people that I work with done is to elevate that, and instead of allowing it to be used as a pejorative to degrade and control us, we are using it, reclaiming that title to use it as a form of empowerment. I do not agree that my position is the most popular. I think that the idea that God hates fags or many of the other slogans that you've kind of displayed are actually in keeping with kind of popular ideology in the United States and beyond for hundreds of years. In fact, it's only been very recently that people who practice any form of alternative sexuality or identity, transgender person, women with rights, it's been very recent that has even been like we have a platform in the United States where those people can actually come out and be relatively free without persecution and experience hate and vitriol. Although clearly that's not completely gone. And so I think that it's an important thing to remember that biblical teaching is probably the oldest, most tired trope that there is, and it has continued to degrade and break people down. And of course, multiple interpretations of biblical texts exists. And I know very much that you disagree with many of the ways that other churches or the denominations do interpret that text. However, that doesn't mean that they're fully endorsing, same-sex marriage and things like that. That's still a contentious issue, and especially claiming the title of Satanism as something we're prideful of or proud of is an unusual tactic, and I would bet that there are more people who agree with you that God hates fags than there are that Satanists are good people. But I do think that young people are often drawn to the mission and the context and the conversation that we bring because young people are smart and young people are open-minded and more willing to consider and reconsider traditions that feel oppressive or they have seen the damage of. And I think that is apparent. We don't have to change the lyrics of music to fit our benefits. Satan has the best music. And those sorts of things are certainly tapped into what's culturally relevant and what's exciting, but it's definitely not the mainstream. It's definitely not popular, and it suffered as a result.
Yes, okay.
Okay. Just quickly, I have Rebecca, right?
Yeah.
Now, is that you holding this sign here? God sent the shooter.
No, that's my
This one.
sister Abby.
Okay, I'm just curious. Where was that?
That was,
I was at a cop's funeral.
yeah, it was at a cop's funeral, and I think it was
perhaps.
in Nebraska or Oklahoma.
The shooters just keep coming around to the cities that you love. Las Vegas.
They just had one in Nashville, 3 o'clock in the morning.
Okay. You think that's the work of God? God sent the shooter?
Yeah, God,
God
that's what
does
the
it
sign
all.
says. There's not
Well, I
anything
understand.
happening in this earth that God didn't decree, bring it forth. You're just watching his providence unfold in front of you. The more you rebel, you can call it being smart and open-minded, it's just simple rebellion.
Well, why
And-
should I worship a God who would appear to be a son of a bitch?
Well,
He's doing
because
this
he
kind of stuff.
created
Well,
you.
here's the thing. He created you. It's his creation.
He can
And
do
if
with his
you can
creation.
rebel
This is
and you
how
can-
this is how he acts. He sends shooters to Las Vegas
See,
to kick off
here's the
people.
thing, when you create your race, you make the rules. But he's made the rules. He said, he gave you fair warning. His word is full of. All I'm asking is for you to obey me. And if you do, I'll bless you. Deuteronomy 28 is huge blessings. But if you don't obey me, I'll curse you. And the rest of Deuteronomy, which is a lot more than the blessings part, is the curses wherewith you will be cursed. And one of them is that your children and you will die by the sword. Bullets are just broken up swords. And bombs, we got a God sent the bomb sign. Look, you're not gonna be able, you don't get a pass. This nation has had a pass for a very long time. That day is gone. You can see by what's unfolding. And then he's got an armory, an arsenal, and he opens it up and all of this nation, we're so strong, we're America. We've got this all going on and we can do whatever we want. But with a tiny little weapon, one tiny little weapon called the snow, he brings Washington, D.C. to its knees, a screeching halt. And not just Washington, D.C., but and then you look at those hurricanes, and they said this coming season will be worse than last. Harvey, Maria, Irma, God sent the hurricane. Those are his work. He says, this is how I'm going to deal with you if you won't obey me. So you wonder, you get to the place at the beginning of the book of Isaiah, and the prophet says, why should you be stricken more and more? You just revolt more and more. The whole head is sick, the body is faint, from the crown to the sole of your feet. Your wounds and bruises and putrefying sores, you're cancer laden, and you haven't even put on a stinking Band-Aid.
You can't look at the result and then call God a son of a bitch.
He gave
Look
you
at
fair
what you're
warning.
doing.
I would, it's interesting though, because I know that you focus on these kind of catastrophes, but violent crime, gun violence is actually on a steep decline. And
That's not the only weapon he has.
well, I understand also
Gun
there are
violence,
much less
yeah.
people are not dying from natural disasters as much as they did. Pandemics aren't as catastrophic. There is an improvements in medicine that mean that people with HIV have near normal life expectancy. I mean, all of these things may also point to the fact, by your logic, that God is approving of the way that we have behaving. And
So you're saying that because God has not yet pulled out a can of whoop ass that will make the ears of him who hears it to tingle,
Yeah.
that therefore, because that judgment has not been executed speedily, he says the hearts of the sons of men will be fully set in them to do evil. And so
I'm
you're
saying
saying because he hasn't yet done that, therefore he's approving of
Well,
your
I'm saying
sin.
if you're saying the kind of natural disasters or man-made catastrophes that have happened are proof that God is condemning us and disapproving, then what about all of the improvements that have happened? The reason that those aren't actually happening. In fact, since gay marriage has become legal, there's been a decline in gun
It
violence.
doesn't
Oh, my
matter.
goodness.
Ultimately, it doesn't matter. When you die, you go to hell. Who cares what happens in your life?
But in the meantime,
In your
Blessings
in
and
the
opinion,
mercies.
meantime, but that's only you saying that the Bible is a lie or it's not the Word of God. But when you say that this is a Christian nation and we're Christians, then you brought the Bible into the discussion.
But
So
I
now
don't
you're
think that
stuck
that's
with
what's
those
said.
words, and those words say, I'm going to do these things to you. But the day is coming when those little things will be huge things. But until that day comes, don't lightly regard or disregard or spit on the mercy of God. It's his mercy that you're not all dead, that we're not all dead.
So
We're not any
if
different
his
than you.
mercy, so I'm saying, why should we fear God's wrath if he also has such abundant mercy?
Because his mercy will not last forever.
Okay,
You
so
don't
we
get
should
to
fear-
mock him.
we
You should fear him
okay, we
because
should fear
it
God.
says from beginning to end hundreds of times, hundreds. Just do a little quick study. You got Bibles on computers. Do a word search. Fear God, fear Lord. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And it repeatedly says, this is the whole duty of man. So let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments. For this is the whole duty of man. For God will bring every work into judgment. Every human will stand before God in the judgment and give an account, not in a mob, but one on one. God and you. No one's going to stand there and bolster you up or be your amen corner or your rah-rah to say, yeah. No, it's going to be you standing there explaining what you did in this flesh. And when you have to explain that you listened or followed the ideas of a rebel, it's going to be a sad, sorry day.
Tell you what, how about we open it up to student questions? You have a few? Let's go. So Erica's hand up. Go ahead, Erica.
I kind of just have like two for both of you. One for you guys. So like when you, I guess I don't know. Do you guys like watch the news or anything? Obviously you do, but like when you watch like the weather, like what are you thinking? You think this is all God? Like people are crazy that they go to
It
school
is
for
all
this? Or like and other things that happen, like do you think I guess kind of like journalists and meteorologists are kind of crazy for what they do? And then two, what do you guys actually do? Like, so if you're protesting all the time, how do you pay your mortgage? I'm just kidding. That's like not really related to everything, but I'm just like trying to rush in my head, like what
Well,
do you
some
do what you do?
Some people spend their time partying.
Yeah.
They spend their money on boats or on this or that or the other. We spend our money on this and we spend our time on this because there isn't anything else. There isn't anything else. Once you get to the flesh is grass. It's the flower of the field.
Yeah.
It's here in the morning and it's gone in the evening. It's cut off and you soon fly away. And nobody even remembers you. This big to-do about Barbara Bush, she'll be gone in a week or 2 weeks. And so now what's left? Let us hear the conclusion. Solomon was the wisest man to ever draw breath, God's word for it. And he lived with much wealth, and he had every kind of a human experience, and he did it with a lot of wisdom. And he quickly, you can imagine, a really smart guy, and it's going to get really hard, really fast, because you are going to quickly get to the bottom line about everything. And so he says, after he describes all kinds, learning and everything, what to spend your money on, your time on, sex, everything. He says, here's the last 2 verses of the book of Ecclesiastes. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for God will bring every work into judgment and lay open every secret thing, whether it be good or whether it be evil. If you are going to spend eternity in hell, you need to get serious about what you're looking at. Sober about what you're looking at. Think of a line with a fine point pen around the largest thing you can imagine. Is it the universe? Is it all the galaxies? What can you imagine that line? Then get the even finer point pen that will make the tiniest of tick marks on that line. That tick mark represents your time on this earth, in this flesh. Then you have eternity. There's no end to it. You can't fathom. Our finite minds cannot properly fathom eternity. That's the time that you're either going to be in eternal torment, where the flame never dies and the fire is never quenched and the smoke of your torment ascends up forever and ever, and the worm, that is the mental torment, never ends. Or are you going to be in heaven? And the question is, what is your heart? What is your heart doing here? What is all this? How does this all land on your heart?
Well, I just have just a quick end point to that, maybe, is just the God that you're describing is authoritative, demands full servitude, lest eternal punishment, uses fear to control people, to control and basically imposes ownership over.
Oh, that
And
sounds
that
like
is
Satan.
true. But he does own you.
Right, so I'm just saying, hell doesn't sound so bad when considering heaven being a place where you're in servitude for eternity. I can learn to live with pain, but I personally cannot learn to live
Bliss.
in servitude to a vengeful, presumably male figure who tells me that I need to be ashamed and be fearful of my true nature. I'm just saying that using fear in the form of eternal damnation as a motivator is potentially misplaced on people who don't identify with that as something that it inspires an action in one way or the other.
It's not a servile fear, it's a reverent fear, like a child has to a parent. And it's not only fear, it's love that motivates someone to serve God, because he's had mercy. If you believe on Christ, if he's given you that belief, then you have Christ as a Savior, as your substitute. He took on your sins, and he lived a perfectly righteous life, unlike any other person who ever walked this life. And then he died at the hand of sinners, and he laid down his life, and then he conquered death and hell and sin, and then he rose himself up.
And
that is love.
And do you
That
believe
is
that
love.
that is important? The reason that you're out on the streets then is to share that message? I don't know.
Well,
I'm
you know
only
what
one of a
Christ,
little. Yeah.
and what you said
Mhm.
earlier, you said, it reminded me of what Christ said. He said, "Ye are my friends if you do whatsoever I command you." It's the same Christ who rose and died and took on our sins, demands obedience.
And he says,
You
if
can't
you
have
love
it both
me,
ways.
Yeah, and if you love me, he says, keep my commandments. And he says, this is the love of God, that you keep my commandments and they're not grievous.
It's perfectly reasonable,
See,
as
when
he
you-
created you, that you obey him. You are the creature, not the creator. Why
And-
are you even talking?
And
I
he
mean, that's
owns
what I
us.
say to myself as much as I say to you.
He owns us.
So yeah, I don't like to be owned or be in servitude to
Too
anyone. So,
late.
you
It's
know,
out of your control. It's
Yes.
out of my
I
control.
picked the other team.
Well,
No, you didn't
but
pick
when
it.
it's-
You
you
didn't
pointed-
pick it.
No.
You were appointed to it.
the point to make about that you didn't pick it, and you picked somebody that you don't think is gonna make you do all that, Satan is controlled by God just as much as you are.
And he has his,
Why is there both about that?
what?
Well, like, if you say we're so meaningless and everything we do is meaningless, why does he care so much that we sin? And if we are sinners, every single one of us, we're gonna go to hell because we don't follow their will or
Honey,
their religion.
See,
So why should we follow your way to God if he's so authoritative?
Paul answered that perfectly, and here it is. Naboto man or woman. That's a neuter gender. That's a neuter gender man. It's a neuter
She's
gender.
answering the question.
Naboto man, who art thou that repliest against God? Can the thing formed say to him that formed him, why have you made me thus? I was explaining this to this little girl when she was just a little girl and she had a lot of questions and a heavy burden about it. And I said, look at it this way. You've got that Barbie sitting there in your lap. What if you got up this morning and you put an outfit on that Barbie and she turned around and looked you in the eye and said, why did you dress me this way? How silly is that? How silly is that?
So we're inanimate objects to him then.
You are I am the potter, he says, and you are the clay. And I will of one lump of clay make a vessel to honor, think of the king's cup, and a vessel to dishonor, think of a toilet. Out of the same lump of clay. It's his call. He repeatedly has the theme of the potter and the clay. He says, Jeremiah, take those rebels over to the potter's house. Pick up that piece of clay and smash it against the wall. That's what I'm going to do. I am going to deal with you because of your deliberate disobedience. And the more you know, the more you're accountable.
But if he made us like that, why would he waste his time on
Right,
it?
that
He
was
does
the
it
question
that
she
way.
had.
That's what
Same thing.
Sure,
It
let me,
shows his glory.
It shows
yes,
his
power.
for his glory,
He
right?
can do what he wants.
we're going to get a lot of
He's
questions here. I want
Right.
to try to recognize as many
Yeah.
folks as I can. Just a real
When
quick,
it's hot,
could
right.
we get, Shirley, could we get maybe, and I'll get to you, Sarah, and then some other folks.
Yes, sorry.
That's all right. Erica had one other follow-up question, which was the mortgage question, a more mundane one.
Oh,
I mean, you guys are getting,
all
you
have
are
jobs.
fine.
Yes, we all work.
We all have at least one job, many of us have 2 or 3
These
jobs.
young ladies are in college.
Okay.
She works. We're lawyers.
Oh, yeah, okay, that is him.
You understand?
What
I
about
mean,
you guys? What do you guys do too?
We also work, I'm an artist and a writer, and that pays my bills.
Okay, I just was curious as to what you also do in other spare time.
Sarah's had her hand up for a while. Go ahead, Sarah.
Is your intention to like change laws and like revoke like gay rights and whatever?
Because
No.
we can do that?
we don't have any power to do that.
Do you want to like influence like the
No.
law?
We don't want
No.
anything, we're telling you the word of God,
Our
that's it.
commission is go into all the world and preach this gospel to every creature. And he that believeth and is baptized will be saved, and he that believeth not will go to hell.
Do you think that your approach has been effective in doing that?
Doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
Our job is to preach this gospel. Yeah, we don't get to manage the message. We just have to say it.
Go ahead, Allie, and then Colin.
So I have a question I have 2 questions, one for you and one for them. So, my first question is I get that I think your approach is kind of like equality of all religions or like, not just religion, but also people who would be atheists or whatever are recognized equally. But I guess I'm just curious what your view is on the role of morals in a society. Are they necessary and where do they come from?
It's a great question. Yes, I believe that one, dominant religious voice should not dictate laws and the rights of everyone. Everyone's diverse beliefs or non-beliefs should be respected under the law and in the communities that they live within. The idea that we need God as a moral compass is a invention of control. The church wants you to believe often that you need them to be good people, or do you need them to know right from wrong, and that's just false. We all possess the capacity to make good decisions or harmful decisions, to know what's right and what's wrong, and there's plenty of cultural examples of this taking place of people who don't participate in any standard or regular form of religious belief. The idea that we are incapable as human beings to make rational decisions, moral choices, really undercuts the power of us as human beings, of the power of our minds, and for us to work together as a community. I would argue that, in fact, under the church's teachings, you get a quite questionable morality in the way that you treat people. And also, the church has been responsible for atrocious crimes against humanity, countless deaths, using God's law as a justification for cruelty. So, and if anything, we should really start to consider our moral and ethical code that we live by, removed from religious doctrine, as a way to think clearly and appropriately about how we best protect our communities and thrive.
Can I say something?
Sure.
You keep saying church, the church, as if there's not many different types. And while I agree that a lot of churches, like what she said, you can strip away the name, they have the same beliefs. But the thing about the church, like the Catholic Church, creating all kinds of atrocities from centuries past, even today when they're raping children in their sanctuaries, that is not to be put on every church, every person, because when you start committing things against the Bible, you don't have any authority from God. When you start killing people, that's not God ordained, that's not Bible ordained. So you can call them a church because they call themselves a church, but they're not really a church.
But the Bible is still the fundamental justification for those actions.
No. When those Catholics were, torturing people, Catholic atrocities have nothing to do with the Bible.
Many
Nothing
people
to do
say
with the
that
Bible.
the actions that you do also contradicts biblical teachings about love thy neighbor, for example.
How do you love
your
them?
neighbor?
Leviticus 19 verses 17 and
insult
18.
and cause them fear, and then
No,
Insult.
you don't need to come up with
Insult.
the answer, it's in the Bible.
The Bible tells you
Bible.
the answer, and this is what we do. You do not suffer their sin upon them,
Okay.
but you in any wise rebuke them.
Okay.
If you don't warn your brother that his sin has taken him to hell, it says, you hate your neighbor in your heart. And then he says, love thy neighbor, but thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself, comma.
Okay,
yeah.
Then he tells you why. Because I am the Lord. I am the Lord your God.
Yeah.
You do what I say. And that's what I require.
I'm saying I don't see the difference between what you're doing and what the Catholic Church is doing, regardless of your
They kill
interpretations.
people.
Of
They
the-
rape children.
They torture
They lie
people.
about God.
Right.
They're
They
sending
create
souls to
their
hell
own-
in massive quantities.
But both cause harm.
No.
No, you
No.
mean
If anyone's
we
causing
hurt
harm,
your
it's
feelings
people.
because you don't want to be obedient. So when we tell you you have to or you're going
It's
to
not
hell,
about hurting
it hurts your
feelings. When you
feelings.
start, when you promote and celebrate bigotry, it has a greater
Wait a minute,
social
where's
power.
bigotry?
Yeah, where's bigotry?
We don't speak about
there.
anything.
I mean,
we never say.
What's
we
the
hate
bigotry? Where's the bigotry?
It's all what
I
the
don't
Bible
hate you, or I don't hate fags, or
But God
We
does,
literally
right?
doesn't
Yeah.
say.
Well,
it
if
doesn't
you've
say
got a problem
don't
with
be
God,
so
then you're
sad.
right back to Neighbor no man who
I
art
can take
thou
that up with
replies,
God though.
yes,
I don't
Lord.
need people on the street telling me that
Yes, but what are you going to do with Christ's clear instruction?
But
To
that
go
should be
into
with
this,
for me to decide.
we're not forcing you to decide anything.
Okay.
You heard our words.
Yes.
What you do with them is strictly up to you.
By the way,
But
there's-
you are fully aware that if you take the path of disobedience, you will go to hell.
and that is love.
Totally.
That is Bible
Yes.
love. That is not anything like what the Catholic Church has done for centuries. Torturing people is not okay in the Bible. Christ said, and John the Baptist said,
We
Do
do not,
violence to
yes,
others.
we do
Love
not
your
force
enemies.
anyone. We have no
It's
power
okay.
to do anything except say words.
Okay. So it's okay. So all right. So we're going to accept the fact that God mandates school shootings and bombings and all this
No, he
atrocity.
sent them.
But He sent them.
That's
That's
human
okay.
error that causes that, and
But
that's sent
Do
from
you
God.
not understand that the Bible has enabled that kind of interpretation?
Well,
enabled
when
that kind of
the
harm.
state puts someone to death for what they did, are they enabling murder? When the state, by the death penalty, puts someone to death that did things that they knew the law was forbidding, no murder. When the Clutter murders happened in Kansas and those two men hung for it, did the state enable sin or murder when they did that? Or did they righteously invoke the penalty of the law, brought the force of the law? Does the sin or the sinner spend that eternity in hell? Does the crime or the criminal go to prison?
What I am saying is that when the thing that you just mentioned was murder. I'm talking about homosexuality, for example. And right, so when you go out onto the streets and you use your rights of free speech, I would very much argue that you are causing a great deal of harm to people who are potentially already suffering, who are already marginalized, and
lied to.
And
They're lied to.
You lied to them.
This generation has got them all thinking that it's okay, I can behave any way I want to, but their conscience, by God's hand, is kicking their ass.
And
And
you
then they
believe-
go die in a school shooting.
Jack's finished.
yeah, so and I'm saying,
We'll go to Colin.
there's a question about free expression, how much harm it causes, because the kind of free expression, free speech that I do kind of builds up and elevates or amplifies marginalized voices, people who are not often represented in the media, people who often aren't granted a voice. When you come out to the streets with your signs and the kinds of actions that you're doing, you seem to have no purpose but simply to inform people. And the method that you've used to inform people is one that inspires, it causes fear, it causes harm, it causes pain. And
The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom.
right,
If you have a proper understanding and a reverence for God Almighty and His power, then that's when you start to say, oh, well, maybe I should obey.
so you're using fear as a tactic to force people to obey, in
God.
hopes that they will obey.
We're not forcing anybody.
The law
We're just
of the
saying
Lord
it's
is
wrong.
perfect, converting the soul. The
And-
testimony of the Lord is sure, making wise the simple. The statutes of the Lord are right, rejoicing the heart. The commandment of the Lord is pure, enlightening the eyes.
It does no harm. It does no harm. The
Right,
fear of the
I'm
Lord
saying
is
I
clean.
think
Read that
practically,
verse.
reasonably, I take into consideration the real impact my interactions with other human beings have at a practical level. I do not believe in a Bible. I do not believe in the Bible. I don't believe in religious doctrine because I think it causes a great deal of harm to society.
But you didn't create these hearts and minds. So when you didn't create them, how do you know what is proper and good for their
Because
hearts and
I
minds?
have an ethical, moral direction and insight because I'm a human being.
Yes, but you
I have
said
compassion,
something a bit
empathy.
ago, that we're all able to make good decisions
Yes.
and we don't need,
Absolutely.
no, hon, we are totally depraved.
Evil.
Yeah.
I just
Totally depraved, total
Okay.
depraved.
Nothing good in it.
Okay, the students' questions are piling up,
Yes.
so I want to get to a few of them.
Students ask questions.
And if you can, if it's possible, try to address the questions directly, and I won't call it a lightning round, but we'll
Gotcha.
try to be a bit more brief, and we can get through more of them. Colin, I think I saw you, and then Anthony. Did you have a question, Colin?
Yeah.
And I'll get back to you, Jeff or Joe. Go ahead.
Okay, I was wondering, so you guys both talk about like God and stuff, but then a lot of people, I feel like Jesus is never brought up ever, especially for like people like there's a lot of people who represent God, but like have like symbolic references towards Satanism, but they talk about God as their savior. So do you guys not believe in Jesus at all? Like, is there a difference?
Jesus Christ is God.
It's the same.
Yes, but for her, for example, like a lot of people, like you guys represent God, but he's not actually your God. You guys,
No.
isn't that Satan?
No, there are different forms of Satanism. There's theistic that does believe in a literal God and a literal devil. I am part of a system of belief that's non-theistic, meaning we don't believe in Jesus, we don't believe in God, we don't believe in any supernaturalism. We have all the defining features of a religion minus the supernaturalist God elements.
So what do you?
We believe in independent autonomy, personal autonomy, independence, challenging systems of corrupt authority and tyranny, just as the biblical figure of Satan was punished for challenging God. We embrace that and also similarly challenge those kinds of systems of power and embrace the title of satanic or Satanism as a result.
So is that like statue Satan then?
It's a Baphomet, so it's a representation of duality of mankind or of humankind. There's beast and man, one finger points to the sky, one to the earth. It's about the duality of our nature that, we don't believe in good or evil because I think that it is very much a harmful construct. Instead, we are, as humans, possess a range of reactions, emotions, and sensibilities that could be deemed harmful or positive, or that help build ourselves up and build our communities up. And so, acknowledging the fact that we possess that range of emotions and reactions is much better than saying that somebody's evil, and dismissing the fact that we have a responsibility to behave morally and to dictate our futures, rather than throwing your hands up in the air and saying it's God's will or something like that. It's a sense of responsibility, independence, and advocacy for oneself.
And so you say, the fool hath said in his heart, there is no God. She's an atheist.
Right.
We knew
And
that.
some people would call that belief satanic. So I guess there you have it. Yeah.
Anthony, go
I
ahead.
guess what I gather is that you and your, they believe that they're ethical and moral. I guess what do you think was ethical and moral about performing the pink mass over the grave of the mother of the Phelps?
That's a great question.
Fred Phelps, huh?
I actually was not part of the organization at that time. I do think, so it's a little bit hard for me to answer that question because I had nothing to do with that.
But was that moral and good, or was that hurtful?
Well, I guess it depends
Was it hurtful?
on your, was it hurtful?
Me or you?
I guess that's a great question. Was that hurtful?
Well, what do you think?
I believe that it probably was hurtful.
Well,
It was
in
would be
your,
right.
by your belief system it is, but don't worry about us.
I'm
It
not
wasn't
worried
hurtful.
about you.
It
I
wasn't
believe
hurtful. It was
many of
stupid,
the-
it was absolutely vile, but it put the proper face on these creatures that are good, telling you they're good, but yet they go out in public to a place where this nation worships the dead. So they went in a thing that by their belief system is sacred and holy and blah blah barf, and then perform sex acts at this spot.
So
And this is the good that they're, total depravity.
Sex in a graveyard. No, to
No,
your
on a
point,
grave.
that was
On
not
a
something I
grave.
was a part of. I don't actually agree with that approach or that action. I will say that my understanding of the rationale was to mirror and provide a counterpoint to a group that regularly protests funerals and causes a lot of harm and hurt to people who are suffering at those funerals. It was a way of leveling the field from my understanding.
Why don't they just get a picket sign and do their own picket?
Because that's pretty boring.
You just said it was anything but boring. You said it was hurtful and it was this.
Yes,
and
and
blah.
Now it's boring,
hurtful
okay.
and boring at the same time. It's not mutually
Gotta try to
exclusive.
pin her down, that's.
My question was, what was the symbolic meaning behind having like the girls kneeling and then having a report over them?
That's a great question. We have done.
This was a video that we saw in class of some, I guess, protests or demonstrations, activities from the Satanic Temple.
We performed a series of kind of political performance pieces, which very much aligns with our beliefs as Satanists, as people who challenge, tyrannical systems and practices. I'm sure most of you have seen, anti-abortion, anti-Planned Parenthood protests, where there's like children holding mangled, exaggerated fetuses, and they're claiming that Planned Parenthood tears apart baby parts. All of these things are untrue.
They do, though.
One second. So they don't, but regardless, we've become kind of desensitized to the horror that those protests present to us.
What about the desensitized to the dead baby that's been mangled and cut up and ripped from and sucked out of its mother's womb?
So we wanted to perform an action that kind of contextualizes the anti-abortion protest, because they're very much theatrical, they're very much exaggerated, and so to do that, we wanted to provide a counterpoint by demonstrating that women are the ones who often suffer from kind of these protests and the shutting down of these clinics, and in doing that, it forces a motherhood upon them. So milk was symbolic of motherhood, and they were in prayer, and their hands were bound, and priests were the ones that were dumping it on them, and they were choking on it as a reflection of the very real lived experiences of women who don't have access to proper family planning resources, and who are forced to carry pregnancies to term because of politics rather than their own choosing.
Classic symbolic speech, right?
Wow.
Did you actually not know she was an atheist? Because it seemed like that surprised you when she said that.
Doesn't matter.
Well,
It's all
I
the same
mean, it's
thing.
yeah.
Not
There's
It's just
definitionally.
different shades.
There's the elect and the non-elect. So you can have any kind of things you pick that you want. It doesn't matter. It's hell or heaven. Why try and cut it all up?
But this talk, just look at the fluffy way she did there, talking about abortion, minimizing the dead baby, maximizing the efforts that people are taking, wasting their time trying to get people to stop. Look, abortion is bloody murder.
Who cares?
Thou shalt not kill.
body?
So
It's
after the rest of it,
murder.
what else are you going to...
Well, let's just say we agree that abortion is murder, which we don't. But let's assume that we agree. The protests aren't stopping abortion. The mandated laws like waiting periods, shutting down clinics doesn't stop abortion. There's things that does actually stop abortion, and it's like increased access to birth control and sex education. There's countless studies that show that that's proven, but we do not invest in those programs. So in reality, people don't care about abortion if they think it's murder. They are actually creating systems that perpetuate the problem and the issue.
I'm starting to think that you don't really like that First Amendment.
Oh,
Because
why
you
is
don't
that?
want people to picket against abortions, and you don't
I
want
do
us
think
to
that
picket.
they have every right to do that, but so do we. We have every right to go
Well,
and dump
nobody's
gallons of milk
telling
in
you
front
you
of them.
can't, and we're not telling you that you're hurtful.
I'm not.
But we are.
you
But
can
you're
tell me
telling
I'm
us
hurtful
that
if
we're
I am.
hurtful.
Well, you can tell me if I'm being hurtful. You have every right to protest. I believe that very strongly, and I believe I do as well. Because free speech doesn't provide you with a platform. It doesn't prevent you from being criticized. It doesn't prevent you from the consequences that are a result of that speech. And I believe very strongly that there are people who are negatively impacted by anti-abortion protests and rallies, and in fact, they are there to promote a type of propaganda against family planning that is completely ineffective and doesn't even serve the purpose that they claim it serves, and that's a problem.
This guy's trying to. Oh, sorry.
Oh, okay, I think I saw Kaylin's hand first. Did you still have a question, Kaylin?
Yeah, so earlier, someone asked you about, the First Amendment, how you feel about that, and you were talking about, people who are oppressed, they have issues with that, and you guys are kind of anti a lot of things, so my question is for both of you guys, how do you feel about the Black Lives Matter movement and the issues that have been going on between, cops and African Americans?
Well, I went to law school because my parents had 13 children, 11 of us went to law school. And the reason we did that, we didn't talk about it. I never thought of doing any other thing. My dad was pioneering civil rights in the state of Kansas, and we all got through law school and helped him with that job. It's different now, but at that time, employment, the conditions in employment were so bad that that's where our focus was. Now, here's what I think. I think that it's wrong. You see video after video after video of lawless conduct by police officers and murdering their neighbors. And they do it to their neighbors of color, and they do it in extreme, they do it to a lot of people because they're lawless. They think they're a law unto themselves, and I hate to say that. There are a lot of good officers, and we've encountered a lot of good officers, but we've also encountered, like this morning, officers who raised their hand to God, took an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution and to obey the law. And they don't do it. And that's just, but they do it in disproportionate numbers to our neighbors of color. And we've all seen the videos. I don't know how there can be any discussion except to say it's wrong. And then it looks like, from where I'm sitting, that there is jury nullification of many of those acts. And so it's wrong, and my dad used to do closing arguments that would draw the courtroom full, overflowing. But one of the things that I heard him say many times, was quoting Abraham Lincoln and the Bible, this nation cannot endure half slave and half free. This nation cannot endure, it's not sustainable to mistreat the people in the dawn of life, the people in the twilight of life, and the people in the shadows of life. And that's what they're doing. And so, good luck with that. It's not sustainable. God isn't going to wink at it. It's not sustainable. He said he's made of one blood, all nations of men to dwell upon the face of the earth. So treat all your neighbors like you want to be treated. All your neighbors. like you want to be treated. You don't want to be shot in the back when you're running away. Don't shoot your neighbor in the back when you're running away.
Yeah, but a lot of the people who are shot in the back never shot anyone in the back to begin with. You know what I mean? That's not an accurate.
I'm saying don't to the police officer.
Mhm.
Don't shoot your neighbor in the back when he's running away.
Because he could just get away with it if he did, though. That seems to be the trend. That's what I'm saying. I don't think we're actually disagreeing on this issue. I think we are agreeing in so much as that there is the police are racist and are not held accountable for their actions. And but you know, I think that all oppression is connected also. So much as that we celebrate anybody going to the streets and having a voice and being an advocate for themselves, that is all connected to the Black Lives Matter movement. So long as women don't have access to reproductive care or family planning methods, so long as LGBTQ people aren't provided the same rights, so long as students are provided a voice, that all of these things are connected to Black oppression, and we have to be able to work to build each other up in order to combat those kinds of injustices.
So I have to just add this. The Supreme Court used to have, there is a line of cases. It says that people of color, women, your conscience of your religion, those things are immutable characteristics of being. You start talking about abortion and sodomy and all the rest of the sins, those are conduct, not immutable characteristics of being. They're conduct, voluntarily engaged in conduct. The pedophile engages in a conduct. The bank robber engaged in a conduct. So what we're doing here is we're blurring all the lines to try to make that righteous cause, sit-ins and the things that happened in trying to bring justice so that this nation endures free for all its citizens. We're trying to blur those lines and say those immutable characteristics of being are now morphing into conduct. We're going to say you can behave any way you want, and you have to now be swept into these immutable characteristics of being. That's all I was going to add that.
Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, I kind of just one for each of you. I know they've said that they're not really looking for anything, they're just trying to get the message out. What is your end game? At what point, say it's church and state are officially separated, what would the mission be going forward and progressing? And then for you, since you sort of answered that question before, we see up there the book about a member who left the church. Do you feel this delegitimizes you in any way, having a member go out and say all these negative things, and how does that affect how you move forward in your message, knowing that someone from the inside is coming out and slandering the name?
Okay, so it's her turn first.
Yeah, it's a good question. Ultimately, our goal is to empower people and provide them with a voice and a platform. You know, there are a lot of issues and a lot of points that we have tackled, like the imposition of theocratic policies that are oppressive, you know, the silencing of women's voices under the yoke of the church or religious beliefs. And ultimately, we want to make sure that people have a voice, are inspired to know that they can also, without any resources such as money or power, challenge established institutions. They can get in the media. They can vocalize their oppression, vocalize their dissent. And in doing that, hopefully make it so that people in positions of power aren't the only ones who have a voice, aren't the only ones who get to dictate what's right and what's wrong. So much of it is about empowering people so that they are able to kind of advocate for themselves and build a community that does that as well.
Okay. So Christ said, this is what he said, "Think not that I am come to send peace on earth. I came not to send peace, but a sword. For I am come to set a man at variance," that's at war, "against his father, and the daughter against her mother, and the daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. And a man's foes shall be they of his own household. He that loveth father or mother or friend or sister more than me is not worthy of me. And he that loveth son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And he that taketh not his cross and followeth after me is not worthy of me." Christ gave us this warning. He gave us, this is what's going to happen. If you're going to call yourself a Christian, you're gonna lose people that you love, because they will say that they love Christ, and then they're gonna fall away. And if they don't believe, if Christ hasn't given you belief, a heart change, then you're not gonna, you can't sustain it. You can't sustain this life.
And so you have to go back to this girl grew up in a family. Her parents actually had raised her as a heathen most of her life. And then she got to be 14 or 15 and things changed. And so she's there for a few years. She doesn't like it. We do not own salvation. We have no power over that. So I have 11 children. Each child is going to come to years. And the Bible uses actually Moses as an example. He was born and taken right into the king's house. It says Moses, by faith, Moses, when he was come to years, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season. And Moses lived a long time, by the way, but it's a season. And then his life ends. Now his eternity is in full swing. Barely getting started, really. But, yeah.
Speaking of started, we're almost near the end. We've got about 5 minutes left. Before I get, Joe, you had a question, but anybody else, any new voices out there I missed? Ben, go ahead. And if we can, let's try to answer quickly, and if all possible, go ahead, Ben.
So I'm Catholic, and so are you saying that, like, so your argument is that, you know, there's a bunch of different churches being made to pick and choose what they want to believe, and I get that, and I actually don't agree with that. Kind of somewhat agree with one concrete, something with what you're saying actually, but like, I'm Catholic, so are you saying that if a priest in another state rapes somebody, am I going to hell for that?
Oh my, I love.
Like, I don't.
Have you seen 3 billboards outside of Ebbing, Missouri?
You're culpable.
It's awesome. There's one little piece in there where she speaks to the law. So it's the law of man and it's the law of God. Yes, that's the short answer, but she says it this way. If there was a time when a law came into sharp focus when these gangs, and so they made it so that if you're a member of this gang, and one of the gang members goes out and kills somebody,
Sin. So
you're,
everybody sins. There's not one.
No. The gang. You've become a member of a gang. You are going to join the Crips. The Crips go and kill somebody. Every member of the Crips can be prosecuted for that murder because you have enabled this. This is what you're doing. Okay. She says, so when she says to this Catholic priest, she says, if you're sitting over there and you're having a cup of tea, and or reading the Bible, and one of your buddies is over there, anywhere, the Catholics are fluid and fungible. Money is fungible. It goes all the way up to Rome. Anywhere, and they're raping somebody, you're culpable. So, and that is what God will hold you all. You have cast your lot in with those raping priests.
Rapist,
absolutely.
So, but sin, everyone sins. There's only one person that has never sinned, and that's God.
Your point being?
If Glasses lady rapes somebody, are you going to hell? Since you believe in the same thing she does?
Me? If she does what?
If you.
If she does what though? If she did what?
If she goes and rapes somebody, are you going to hell? Because you believe the same.
Okay, so if she did that, let me answer.
Your analysis
because your analysis doesn't complete. Because in the rape of the priest situation, they all know what's going on, and none of them are doing anything about it.
Exactly. I disagree with that.
Well,
I don't think they all know what's going on.
Oh my gosh! Of course they all know what's going on. Oh my gosh! They all know what's going on.
Really?
Here's what this is what Christ instructed.
They live under a rock.
Come out from among them, and be ye separate, and touch not that unclean thing, and then I will be your father, and you'll be my child. If she rapes somebody, first of all, if I knew about it, which I probably would know about it, because you would know about it, that would be, no, look, everyone knows about the raping priest. I thought in your scenario, she does something like what they did. And you're saying, wouldn't I be culpable? Well, I'd have to know in order to be culpable. It would have to be something that comes to light. I'm assuming in your scenario, it came to light. Let's say that it did. I would no longer, look, so many things, your story doesn't fit in this scenario. But so many things would have to have changed in order to.
It's no different than the girl that was on the screen.
If she did such a thing, she would be gone from here. She wouldn't be engaging in that
I wouldn't be a
conduct.
member of the church. I wouldn't be a member of the church. I wouldn't have anything to do with them. You as a Catholic, when you know that priests are raping, you don't have anything to do with them anymore. You come out from among them and be separate from them.
Every car that parks in the parking lot is giving their countenancing their sin. So don't do it. Get away from it.
The long story short is that because you're a Catholic, they believe you're going to hell regardless of whether or not
you are guilty of every crime that you know about those Catholic priests doing. And the worst is not the rape. The worst is the lying on God. The worst is the lying on God.
You know what things they've done, and you're still there. You know things they've done, and you're still there.
You are a supporter of those people.
You walk into a church.
Yes, you are.
You said you were a Catholic when you started this discussion. Well, then you're guilty.
You don't call yourself a Catholic.
You should be ashamed of that. You shouldn't say the word Catholic in your mouth.
You should run from there. You should say, I used to be a Catholic, but I'm not anymore.
Because they're evil pieces of crap. Yes, that's exactly what it is.
Any that's there continuously calling themselves a Catholic, they are guilty.
And it's not just rape. It is lying on God. It's the idolatry. It's the praying to Mary. You have nothing of that in the Bible.
There's nothing about the Catholic monster that is anything remotely resembles God.
And then you have what she said earlier about all the murders that they've done for centuries. You have all of that when you call yourself Catholic. You're bringing all of that on yourself. Get away from that monster.
Okay, so take away the rape thing, right?
So you can't.
You are a monster. You're part of the Catholic monster.
No, so like if
Good, we've got about one more minute, folks.
The worst is they're lying on God. Okay, so go ahead. Somebody.
Well, I tell you what, we do have just about one more minute. We will have, if you're free, some folks will be down in Moore 118 in just a couple of minutes if you'd like to interact, discuss, debate more. I'm sorry, I think I saw you a while back, Jeremy, and I didn't get to you. I'm sorry about that.
No worries.
I saw nothing. You have a question, real quick?
Yeah, after what they just said. By grouping him in with Catholics, aren't you also in a group with...
Okay.
Okay, aren't you also in a group with all of theists? Like people who believe in God? Are you not?
We are out here very publicly separating
And he's
ourselves
publicly
from their
separating
lives.
himself from them.
No, he said
He
he
just
started
did.
with, I am a Catholic.
I would like to just point out that the women on this stage are very special. They hold a very particular interpretation of biblical text that makes them believe that they are exclusively privileged to heaven because of their special interpretation.
To me.
She's speaking for us.
Yes.
She doesn't know us.
I'm just saying.
She's more articulate, so I'll listen to her
I'm
right
just
now.
saying that. I'm saying that this is
speaks
something
your
that I've heard.
language.
I'm saying that
Sunglasses.
by separating yourself and saying that you are the only ones who are accurately interpreting the Bible, that you are therefore not culpable for any blame having to do in relation to the Bible, is potentially a sin involving selfishness.
That's blah, 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 blah.
Right.
That's just a
Okay,
way for you to try to
this is-
demonize, minimize, marginalize the Word of God. And it's not
I
going to
think
work.
they're doing it very well.
You're not,
Yeah,
it's
you
not
just
gonna
did it
work.
to him.
It's not gonna work. Okay, that
told you
young
at the
man had a
beginning,
question.
she-
What's your question, hon?
believes the same way.
You with the hat.
Hat guy.
Unfortunately, we are out of time. Let me just, and some students have to get to other classes. Let me just say this, folks, again. It sounds as if there's going to be a fair number of folks already in 118. If 2 or 3 of you want to join us down there, that's great. Just kind of allow some other folks into the room first. And if you're going to join us for dinner, talk to me for a minute after class.
Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you. Thank you guys for coming, folks.